For more on this story, we're joined now by the former head of coalition forces in Iraq, retired Major General Jim Molan. He's with us from Canberra. Jim Molan, good morning.
Michael, good morning.
When you first heard details of this tragic incident, what were the first thoughts that went through your head?
Well, the first thoughts that went through my head were that this is the consequence of a lack of decisive strategy. You see, you've got to think big in this game because wars are just a series of errors linked to each other, and whichever side has the less errors, they've got the better chance of winning. But this is pretty terrible, isn't it, Michael?
Oh, it's truly shocking, and of course, truly shocking for the family members of the 16 Afghan civilians killed. Let's not forget that. But do you think it suggests that, although we don't know the motivations, and we're not going to speculate on the motivations of this US soldier, that American and coalition soldiers are under increasing amounts of stress as this mission continues in Afghanistan?
I guess that's possible, but I don't think it's the big issue in this. We had about 1 million Americans serve in Iraq, probably a lesser number than that have served in Afghanistan. Of those people, you've got to find someone who, and no one goes to war without being affected. Some people are affected more than others, and we don't know what's happened to this guy. But I think it is from my point of view, this all comes back from the fact that because we didn't get in there and do this war early in the bit with sufficient resources, both financial aid resources and military resources, the longer you string these wars out, the greater is the probability of this kind of thing occurring. We've seen the Quran burnings, we've seen a large number of Afghans murdering Australian and German, French, British troops who were trying to train them. 60 of them have been killed over the last 2 or 3 years. And now, of course, we're seeing this terrible thing today.
Do you fear in this, given that we have seen many deadly cycles of revenge here, that there'll be blowback for coalition forces?
Well, we saw that after the Quran burning, again, innocent people or people unrelated to the initial incident died. But let's learn the right lesson from this. Let's not focus too much on this. The NATO forces will handle this. If it's one thing we're pretty good at in Afghanistan, amongst the NATO forces, it's handling errors like this. That will all go ahead. The big question is what caused this? And what causes this is that 10 years on, we're still in Afghanistan. If you don't have a decisive strategy to get in and sort these wars initially, and if you can't win, then you get out. But hanging around for 10 years is not doing anyone any good.
President Barack Obama, of course, has expressed his deep sadness about what happened and just a few hours ago phoned President Karzai in Afghanistan. We can bring up some pictures of the President making that phone call. But how much, Jim Molan, how much tougher does this make the Obama administration's attempts to enforce that transition in 2014 in Afghanistan?
I think there is no doubt at all that the majority of the combat troops will leave in 2014. I heard an interview on the American C-SPAN channel last night speaking about comments the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff made in relation to the fact that he would prefer to keep the majority of the troops that don't go by the 1st of October. And you must remember, President Obama's taking out a third of his force out there in Afghanistan by the 1st of October this year. The other 2/3, the chairman wants to keep them in right till the end of 2014. And that's the only way we're going to give Afghanistan a chance of success into the future.
And just before you go, Jim Molan, on another issue, you, of course, were deeply critical of Stephen Smith in the wake of that report into the Skype sex scandal, but you'd also be aware of comments over the weekend by retired Major General John Cantwell, also strongly critical of Stephen Smith. General Cantwell accused Mr Smith of showing no respect to Australian troops during a visit to Afghanistan when General Cantwell was still the head of Australian forces there. There was obviously deep resentment within senior levels of the military about Mr Smith. What course of action do you believe the minister should take as he tries to smooth these relations down?
Well, I think the minister would probably think back and consider that his intervention, his intervention in the Skype affair against Commodore Kafer was rather intemperate. If he'd made exactly the same intervention privately, even used the same language privately in the Chief of the Defence Forces office, justice would have been better served by everyone concerned.
Jim Molan, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks, Michael.